Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. If you're a yoga practitioner or teacher who knows that there's more to yoga than poses, but you're wondering where to find that, come join our quiet little party. Here you'll find resources to help you deepen your practice, as well as insightful conversations with yoga, movement, and meditation teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. So we talk about all things gentle yoga, meditation, yin, restorative, yoga therapy, mindfulness, and more. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Happy winter solstice, everyone. It's winter solstice when I'm recording this, and it'll be coming out the next day. And Christmas is also coming up this week, so Merry Christmas to those of you who enjoy that. I hope you are all enjoying some holiday downtime, or maybe you will be soon. I'm certainly planning on going onto my couch and watching some movies and doing some puzzles pretty soon. Today's episode with Karen James is really fun. I'm looking forward to sharing this with you because we're talking about creativity and yoga, and particularly the joy of sitting on a chair, as she says. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation. And she even ends it with a poem that she wrote. Such a creative person. And before we get into it, I will mention that I have a drawing going on for a free private lesson with me. So anyone who purchases a gift card to the Move to Meditate class library, or who joins as a new member themselves by December 24th, Christmas Eve, will be entered to win the private lesson. So the private lesson would take place online sometime in the new year. We'll schedule it together, and it would be an hour where you could work on whatever you'd like with me. Okay, so any gift card purchase in the next few days, and you could win that little bonus for yourself. So the gift cards to the Move to Meditate library are a great way to introduce someone to the benefits of this gentle, mindful, therapeutic yoga and movement practice, like what we're always talking about here on the podcast. So if you know someone who could stand to move a little bit better or release some tension or de-stress, and to have them be in safe and trusted hands with an easy to access platform, may I suggest the Move to Meditate class library. You can choose how many months of subscription that you want to gift them, or you could pick a flat amount that they can put towards a subscription. And the gift card would be emailed to them with really easy instructions, a holiday message for you, and they just claim their credit and get started with their classes at home. So you can find all of this info at movedtomeditate.yoga/gift cards. movedtomeditate.yoga/gift cards, plural. Other than that, I am looking forward to the new term of live stream classes that's starting up in early January. And I'm cooking up some new free resources for inquiry and practice that will be included in all of my email newsletters starting next month. So I'm pretty excited about that, but I think I'll wait until next week to tell you more. This feels like enough for now. So that pretty much covers it, and let's go ahead and talk to Karen James. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So today we have the lovely Karen James as our guest, and we're going to be talking about creative chair yoga and more, probably whatever comes up as usual. And I met Karen online, as I've met many lovely yogis, and she's located in the UK, and out of the goodness of her heart, spending her Friday night talking to me. So that is, I'm thankful for that, Karen. Where exactly are you in the UK?
So I live in a county called Hampshire and a place called Basingstoke, and I'd probably say London. I live about 57 minutes out of London by train. So I know, especially for Americans, you might think, where is Hampshire? Where is that? So if I say it's probably about an hour or so out of London.
I'm going to go look it up on the Google Maps after we finish recording, because that'll be fun to find out where you are. Nice. So let me just start with reading Karen's little bio, her short bio, and we'll kick it off from there so you have a sense of who she is. So, Karen James has been consistently practicing yoga since 2014 and teaching since 2019. The kinds of classes she likes to teach are support based, gentle movement, including yin and chair yoga. She advocates that yoga should be for every body type and should leave individuals feeling empowered with a stronger awareness of their body and mind connection. So, yes, yes to all of that. We're on the same page. So, Karen, would you like to tell us a little bit more about your background, your yoga life, what you teach, whatever you
Absolutely.
want us to know?
Okay. So I decided after hitting 50 that I wanted to be not so much teach yoga. I just wanted to, as I think with a lot of people, deepen my understanding
Hmm.
of yoga. So I took my teacher training starting in 2018 and completed in 2019, working full time. And I still work full time now. So I teach part time and online only. Completed my teacher training in 2019, and then if it wasn't for people at work, because I thought, no, I can't do it, I can't do it. But as always, just before I finished, people at work said, please, can you teach a class? We'd love it if you do it. So for practicing purposes, I did. And then once I passed my 200 hour, and also on top of that, I was doing a 50-hour anatomy as well, because I just discovered at
Mm.
50 that anatomy was something I was quite fascinated by. So yeah, started teaching sort of once a week after work, and then teaching at the weekends because I was travelling into London for full-time work. And then obviously, as with everybody, in March 2020, life changed as we know it. So I started working more from home, and then decided, why not try online, follow what everybody else was doing, start getting the bits and pieces together. And again, another friend said, you've got such a lovely voice, why don't you do some meditation? Nerves, thinking I can't do this. And they said, it's bigger than you, the COVID, it's bigger than you, please do it. So yes, started doing meditations, and then noticed, I think I wanted to slow down, because at the beginning I was very much about power, inversions, all of that kind of thing. And then I think last year I just started to realize I wanted to slow down,
Mm.
sort of teaching yin, yoga nidra. I've always enjoyed using support or props, but yeah, just kind of evolved that way, and did a chair yoga teacher training as well, which thoroughly enjoyed, and meditation. And just as last year, because I was isolating on my own, I think I just kind of started doing a little few more courses, and yeah, the rest is history. And I teach still online, maybe 4 or 5 classes a week, as well as still working full time. So
That's a lot when you're working full time to actually like prepare and show up for and have the energy for 4 or 5 classes a week. So you must be quite dedicated.
and I didn't think that was a lot. I was thinking, gosh, I'm only teaching 4 or 5. But as you know, as mentioned before, that measuring your own success, sometimes you just need to stop and just
Hmm.
say, okay, that's enough. And people are benefiting from it. I'm benefiting from it. So just take a step back and enjoy. If you
Yeah.
don't enjoy what you're doing, it's some way it's going to come across. So yeah.
Yeah, I love how you said if it weren't for your coworkers, you probably wouldn't be teaching because they sort of cajoled you. And this is what happens when you take a yoga teacher training is everyone around you finds out and then they start asking you all their questions about their body parts and about what's a good stretch for this and and then pretty soon you're teaching them classes. And that is what happened to me as well when I think back on it, is that the first class I started was a free class in a local park, and the 4 people who came were my husband and 2 coworkers and someone else who discovered us eventually. But yeah, and that was kind of how I got my start and gained confidence teaching, because there were people who wanted to learn from me, even though I was brand new. And, like right away, I realized that everybody is not always able to do many of the things that we were trained in yoga teacher training,
Mm,
and that I needed to get creative and kind of like make things work for my students. Like one of my first students had a hip replacement, one had MS, and this is in my little class in the park. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to keep learning. Like, how am I going to serve these people who want to do this class with me? So, and we were kind of talking before about, why you kind of moved from that sort of power and headstands and like that orientation to yoga into a more gentle and accessible type of teaching style. And yeah, and it wasn't um, like a big epiphany moment for you, you said. But can
absolutely.
you tell us a little bit more about that journey and kind of how you've arrived at this style that you offer?
Yeah, I think one, my age, because I'm 53, but also I just realised that that wasn't what yoga was about. It wasn't a pushing myself to do headstands and handstands, and there's nothing wrong with that, if that's what you want to do. But I just realized that wasn't being kind to who I was. And it was also very much, as I'd spoken to you briefly before, about how my teacher training went. And that was kind of the push, the push, the push to be better, to do this, or, and you kind of, I suppose, came out of that and thought, that's not really how I want to be perceived. That is not who I
Mm,
am. And also the shock that you're surrounded in teacher training, and anybody that completes yoga, that they can move. So actually, then when you start to meet the real population,
regular people.
regular people, they can't do half of these things that you take for granted, or I took for granted. And
Exactly.
I do remember going round to a friend's house, and I had it all planned because I had to practice, had everything mapped out, what we were going to do. And she couldn't get down to the floor.
Mm,
And it was just a shock to me because, I surrounded myself with people who were like me in terms of movement and who
hmm
could do all of that kind of thing. And I just realized that, you know, I need to take a step back. I need to understand that that's not the way I want to teach, and that also that I don't want to take anything away from anybody. I don't
hmm
want them to come to a class and feel as if they shouldn't be there. And yeah, that was definitely a shock to me. When I just said, let's not worry about this. Let's just rip this up and let's just start doing something that, forget all, forward folds, cat cow. Let's just forget everything and let's just start with some breathing and some gentle movement. And I think that's another thing that was a bit of an eye opener for me as well, that people, yeah, ordinary people who would probably never go to a studio, wouldn't dream, just automatically think it's not for me.
hmm
Um, and I think as well, obviously being Black, just to know that some of the spaces that I go into or felt okay going into, I would be the only Black person there. So that was another thing that, again, started to come a bit more to the forefront of why are there no other Black people in the room.
hmm
I never felt intimidated. I never felt that I shouldn't be there. Probably my upbringing was because we moved around a lot. So it didn't affect me to walk into spaces like that. Um, However, it was just added to the fact that I thought this isn't right. We need to be more accessible. And how do I do that? And why do I want to do that? And yeah, I did, definitely.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's so many layers to this concept of accessibility, and And it really becomes inclusivity, and like, how can we actually make these teachings and practices welcoming to the most amount of people? You know, if someone wants to practice, the last thing I would ever want to do is discourage them or
Mm.
make them feel unwelcome or make them feel like they couldn't do it correctly or their body wasn't right, or something like that, because I think that's a really narrow vision of what yoga is.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that that seems to be more common than not.
Mm. Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also yoga, isn't just poses.
No.
And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, how yoga has benefited you beyond the physical part, and like how it's woven into your life, and how your practice has kind of rippled beyond the mat, if there are ways you can even think of or articulate.
Yeah, definitely. I think when for many years I tried lots of different things. I tried Reiki healing. I had crystals. I did all of the things that I thought would help me to self-awareness. So almost like taking yourself and peeling an onion with tweezers, taking off layer, little by little, emotional freedom technique, all sorts of things that I decided I didn't like who I was and I wanted to change.
Mm,
When I started with yoga, that helped me almost to see that I felt yoga was the missing piece of the puzzle in terms of self-awareness and self-help. Um, it was much more, even though it's a physical practice, I think we always go to it for a physical practice, it helped me be much calmer. It's helped
mm.
me to find my peace and my joy. And I've always, when people said they have been passionate about something, I've never understood it because I've never had a passion. I think I wish I understood what a passion was. And then when I started it, to be able to sit down and read a book or plan a class and do things that's not Instagram worthy. Nobody saw me practicing for 2 hours doing something. That's when I thought, when you get lost and immersed in something, that's a passion. Now I
Hmm.
understand what people mean by passion. It's not, I'm doing this so I can post it on Instagram. It's, this is the thing, this is the work behind the scenes that nobody sees.
Mm,
This is where I was able to set boundaries, be able to say no and feel absolutely 100% okay with that. Um, Not carrying around shame, really beginning to be self aware of my body, reconnecting with understanding what one part of the body could do to the other, when I was tired, or just being able to listen to the signals that I was being given, and just being able to take a step back. And I feel that it's just little ripples through practicing yoga, and just feeling like I've come home to it. It's just been such a wonderful journey that's gone very quickly. And then just knowing that actually this is a journey. It's, at the beginning when I started it, I didn't think it was an ongoing, I'm forever a student, but you just are. And if it's something that you think, I've done my 200 hour and that's where it stops, you're going to be in for a bit of a shock, because if it, as you develop and as you change, your personality
hmm.
changes, what comes from the inside out changes, then you move away from what you knew, and I say from the power and being all of that. When I started to believe in myself more and feel more empowered, and just all of a sudden not worrying about what people thought of me on the mat, when I now, I started to practice with props, with the blocks, thinking this is my class, this, I'm a student, this is my class, this is how I want to show up in the world. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I don't care that nobody else in the class is using them. I'm going to use them. And then you just train yourself to say, I'm going to take a class and I'm going to use a strap and a block, and I'm going to just see, how does my brain want to adapt? How does it want to adapt? So, yeah, it's just gaining the confidence to be able to do that. And I feel without participating in yoga, I just wouldn't have the confidence I do today, without a doubt.
That's incredible. And it's so funny how you were talking about the power yoga, and it's like you've actually discovered the real power yoga, which is the gentle stuff that has, empowered you to be more authentic and more true to yourself and to show up with your props and to like do what you need to do because you have that greater sense of self connection that
Mm.
informs all the choices that you're making in your practice. And like we don't have that at first. That develops
Mm.
really if we stick with the practice and hopefully have some good mentors and teachers along the way. I love that. Yeah.
Definitely, it has been a, a definite journey. And I think really from using Instagram and coming across other teachers and what they do, and just, yeah, being a little bit more open to learning different things, different styles, and yeah, I suppose gravitating towards people that are more accessible, or would like to be more accessible, because as we both know, you'll see things, when I started looking at hashtags and thought, oh, let me just do beginners yoga, and I thought, wow, that, no, that, wow, people do new to yoga, and they do things like, some of these postures, or you
Hmm.
know and then, yeah, I just started thinking, that's not the way to do it. And what if I can't stand up? What if I can't get to the floor?
Hmm.
How do you feel when you go into a class and they just say, use that if you need to, or take a child's pose if you can't do? And I just thought to myself, I would hate anybody to feel that
Hmm.
I would take something away from them. And I remember in a class, when I was teaching colleagues, that somebody was doing their own thing, and I remember going over to her and helping her, as I thought, with this, oh, I've got to assist, you've got to be all hands on and assist.
Hmm.
And in that moment, I saw her body language change, I felt something shift, and I knew I had taken something away from her practice.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking, that was her practice. That was not for me to impose my will and my idea on what the pose should look like, or how she should feel, or where she should put her body. I took something away from her. And while she may not have noticed, I'd spotted it. It was just something very, very quick. And I walked away from that thinking, I would never do that again. I will not take away
Mm.
something from somebody. And it was just a valuable lesson that I've tried to take forward, because it just shook me. I must admit, that really shook me.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, and it's so interesting because, like some schools of yoga really do emphasize those hands-on adjustments. And um I also don't use those very much. I mean, definitely not right now teaching online. But when I did my 300 hour is when I really learned how to use props skillfully. And I realized that I didn't need to manipulate people's bodies with my hands.
Mm,
If I could give them a prop and have a dialogue with them and let them find the shape in their own way, that was seems so much more productive than me trying to do a hands-on adjustment.
mm,
And so it's interesting, I think, when teachers do hands-on adjustments, most of the time I think they're coming from a good place of like wanting to keep people safe and wanting um, to rely on their teacher's eye in a way to kind of give them the sense that what they're offering is landing and that people are understanding it and that people are doing the poses in a safe way. But I'm not sure that's actually the path to safety in a yoga class. And it does take a kind of radical mindset shift for a yoga teacher to kind of put the safety responsibility back into the hands of the student
mhm,
in a way. And I think for most of us, teaching online has been like a crash course in that. So I wonder if you could comment on, this idea of safety and teaching online and not doing hands-on adjustments and maybe not even seeing the students, and kind of how you think about that.
Well, I always laugh because sometimes I'll comment on, especially Alex Crow on Instagram, where she
Hmm.
poses some questions sometimes, and we'll talk back and forth. And I'll say, I am not doing anything that requires me to keep you safe.
Right.
So I don't have to see you, and I am not doing anything that inherently puts you in danger. So unless you disregarded anything that I've said and you've gone off to do something, I don't need to keep you safe. I literally am there to hold space for you
Mm,
so that you feel safe within yourself to explore and reconnect with your body. So inherently, there is nothing that we're doing that is deemed, and I laugh as well because I think if you were in a studio, somebody could have drove to the studio without a seatbelt on because they don't care and they're talking to their friend. And so they've done everything comes to the studio door and they've done something unsafely. And then all of a sudden they walk in and I'm taking responsibility of keeping you safe. So I'm also then taking away your responsibility for yourself, your empowerment,
hmm. Hmm.
your agency. I have to deal with that for myself. So you keep hold of that. You're keeping hold of that. I'm not taking anything from you. If you don't want to have your camera on, being online, I love teaching online because I know if they have their camera on, I can see that everybody's exploring something in a completely different way. And I embrace that and I love that. And I'll say to people, you're all doing something different. Now, that could be, I didn't cue properly because you're all doing something way different than I thought that was coming out of my mouth. Or, so that's for me to look at and understand for myself. Or the way you've interpreted that today, in this moment, in your body, is perfectly acceptable.
Hmm.
And there's going to be that internal dialogue for me to say, oh gosh, did you do this right? Didn't you do that right? But, going back to your question, I'm not doing anything that isn't deemed safe. I'm not going to say it's easy because, again, that's me making the assumption of
Hmm.
your body that forward fold or raising your arm above your head, it's easy for me. But I don't know that it's easy for you. You
Hmm.
might not be able to get your arm past your shoulder. You might not be able to get your hand by bicep by ear or anything like that. So I don't make the assumption that anything is easy. We're going to do it in a different way, and you have to accept and then offer people different ways because we're creatures of habit and we move in the same way all the time. So
Hmm.
when you offer three or four different options, and then you talk about, if you've got abundance in the front body, if you have abundance in the front body, maybe you need to open your arms wider or your legs wider. And then the feedback is, no one ever told me that. No one ever told me I could do this. And then as people get more confident, sometimes at the end of class we'll talk and they'll say, oh, I didn't want to do that because today I've got a bit of a thing in my neck and then I felt it, and I know that you said listen to your body, so I'm listening. And for me, that is amazing. If somebody says I didn't do what you said, the reason being XYZ, and I tried something else and it worked for me, to me, I say thank you, because that is ultimately what we want you to do. We want you to be confident in your own ability on any given day and choose what it is or opt out, but knowing you can opt out and not fear that. So that's when I know people have their own safety. They're looking after themselves. So yeah.
Yes, that's a successful teaching moment because, the way it sounds like you teach, and the way I think of it too, is just helping to guide people back into their own body, and giving them some prompts perhaps for discovery, for their
Mm.
own discovery, but really encouraging them to notice what they're feeling and to make choices based on that feedback rather than on copying what I'm doing or anyone else is doing. And I'm giving the structure of a class, I'm giving suggestions, I'm, taking them through a process, but it's all about options, and it's all about empowering people to make those choices. So I love how you describe that.
Absolutely. And I'd say, it's not my saying, I can't remember where I heard it from, but I do say I'm here to facilitate and not dictate movement to you. So, however you're showing up today is exactly where you want to be. You're enough as it is. That's it. And then don't go any further. I'm not here to preach to people, but, just letting them know that they're enough as they are. So, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about chair yoga specifically, because I've watched through quite a few of your videos on Instagram, and you often incorporate a chair into them. And I think it's an underutilized yoga prop, in my personal opinion. It's a great yoga prop. Um, so maybe you can kind of tell us a little bit about your relationship with the chair as a yoga prop, and who you think could benefit from bringing a chair into the practice.
Um, I think everybody could benefit from using a chair because actually we spend most of our times on our backside. So whether that's on a sofa, some people might sit on the floor, but if it's a sofa or a stool, or if you're at your office, a home office, at work, we spend a lot of time sitting down. So, first of all, when a lot of people say, oh, chair yoga, that's for old people, I say, well, if you sit on a chair yoga is for you. And it took me a little while to understand that I don't have to necessarily adopt every single posture from standing to the chair. You can
Hmm.
utilize the chair to make up something for yourself. You can decide. So that's another thing it took me a little while to understand and know that I'm not going to try and force everything that we do on a mat on a chair. So
Hmm.
the first thing that sort of a distinctive for chair is that we're not in the chair. We're on it. We're using it. We're on it. We're an extension of the chair. And how do we
Hmm.
create that extension of the chair and know that whilst I'm just using this as support in a different way, and how are we going to do that? So that's the first thing I kind of always say. And I just spent such a lot of time sitting. I just spent a lot of time sitting that I thought to myself, I took a course and enjoyed it, and just thought to myself that that's what, whilst I can do yoga on a chair, what if I took a course which was the Lakshmi Volka 20
Hmm.
hour training, and it just gave me a little bit more and a way to utilize the chair, think about it. And it was about, what if somebody can't stand or doesn't want to stand this week? It's not about, and I think that's the issue, is we just make the assumption that it's people that can't stand up. And until you go through an injury of some sort
Hmm.
and then have no choice but to, if you wish to continue your practice, to use a chair, then all of a sudden that's when you feel, oh, I'll use it. So yeah, and it forced me to be creative, to say, okay, if somebody wanted to sit down, how would they interpret the postures? Or if you wanted to use it as support, so I can stand, but I'm a little bit shaky on my feet, how can I utilize the chair? But also the main thing is to say to people, whether you're standing or seated, there's nothing here is better than anything else. How you
Hmm.
feel. So it's not, oh, sit down if you need it, or if you can't stand, this is what you should do. There's no sides to it. There's, if you want to sit down at any time, sit down. If you want to do something, if we're doing a yin class, the chair is part of yin, and I show the an option on the chair, show an option seated on the floor, or however anybody wants to do it. But the chair is part of that. And same with classes, that a chair is there, and it's part of that, and you can have the option. It's about having options. It's not about whether you're infirmed in any way, or having
Mm-hmm.
to sit on a chair. So I just feel that being on a chair is quite adaptable in different ways, and you can make it just so different and fun, and be, try to be creative in your language on how you're explaining things, and yeah, so yes.
It's so practical. And I think that there's a lot more possibility for creativity than people might imagine. And like watching some of your videos, you're so fluid on the chair and you move from pose to pose in this like flow. And I'm not sure flow is the word that comes to mind for people when they think of chair yoga. Maybe they think of it as being kind of stodgy. Um, and you're quite a creative person also. Did I mention in Karen's bio that she is also a poet? So I think that the creativity thing comes probably quite naturally to you. And that's kind of one of the real reasons I wanted to have you on and talk about this, because if you can enlighten any of us about, how you bring creativity into your use of props and especially the chair, so that we can actually get more people on board with playing with this prop.
I think probably start from an anatomical standpoint or viewpoint, and think of, okay, I'm 5'3", and I know that my body proportions are sort of, my femur length, my tibia, everything is okay. And I know that I have some hypermobility in certain joints. However, I think, okay, what if somebody has short arms, long torso, short legs? How are they going to interpret movement? What if somebody has really long legs, short body, but really long arms? So that's how I actually start thinking. I start thinking from an anatomical point of view. And no matter what happens, all this, keep practicing, you'll become more flexible, you'll become more this, you'll become more that. You're not changing your bone structure.
Well, your arms aren't going to get shorter, right?
Yeah, your arms aren't going to get shorter, your legs. So that's not going to change. Or if you've got abundance in the front body, I am not here to change you.
Hmm.
I am here to find a way that works for you as you are in this moment. So I might sometimes sit on a chair and think, okay, I don't have an arm. Okay, I'm not going to use my left arm or my right arm. How does that change things for me? Okay, I'm not going to use my arm and the opposite leg. How is that going to change things? How can I imagine if I have really long arms and short legs? What would that be? And that I could then spend a very long time imagining. And I can't be that person, but I can try and imagine, because I know that we may teach to our own ability. And sometimes I have to say, well, what can I do outside? How can I step outside of my own ability? I am not for everybody, and I can't possibly be for everybody. There'll be certain people that would come along, and I wouldn't have that capacity and know, but I would go away and learn and think, well, I didn't know what to do with that particular person. I'm going to go away and research that. How can I make that better? So that's my creative little process is, okay, I know I can only work with what I've got, but what if I couldn't use my arm? What if I imagined my legs to be longer? How would I sit on a chair? Well, for a start, and I always tell people, listen, unless that chair you're sat on was made specifically for you with all the measurements of your limbs, and that might, you might need to adjust in some way. You might need to make the seat higher. You might need to
Hmm.
make the floor come to you. The chair that you choose, there's nothing wrong with your body. It's the chair that you sat on isn't right. So how do we adjust the chair? Because human beings, we're instantly going to blame ourselves. We're instantly going to say, well, I can't do that on the chair because my legs are too short, or my leg. And it's like, no, no, no. Remember, there's nothing wrong with you. It's the chair that you're sat on. We are making the best of it. So that's kind of what I try to remind people of. You're not changing your bone structure. And how can I facilitate that you will be accepting of that, and then learn another way, learn to embrace who you are?
That is one of the challenges of using the chair, because some of the other props are easier to just, flip the block to a different level, higher or lower, or just shorten up the strap or lengthen the strap. But the chair is the chair, and it's kind of set in its ways, and it does fit us all differently. And particularly if people are using all kinds of different chairs at home, we might not totally know how to prepare for that. So, I think your creativity is a really strong asset, because when we teach gentle yoga, and we are open to trying to dialogue with our students and the variety of different, types of bodies and different, aches and pains that they might have and histories that they might have in the body, it really requires creativity. It really requires like an ability to kind of like experiment, like try this. What do you think? What if you do this? How about we do it like this today? And to just kind of see where that takes us. So I think inherently creativity is a big part of teaching any kind of gentle or therapeutic yoga.
Definitely. I agree with you 100% there. And also sometimes, um, you know, changing, not that everybody has to be the same. This is something I'm playing around with now, is that, okay, if you can't do something with your legs, let's switch it up and let's use the arms. So some people could be doing the movement with their legs. Some people will do it with our arms. Don't
Hmm.
worry about, well, it's a, and I'm now trying to take away things, for example, um, I'll say fold. We're going to do a fold. I'm not saying forward fold, because actually, how you want to fold your body, and then I'll explain. You may want to bring your torso forward. You may want to bring the lower part of your body towards you. It's still a fold. And
Hmm.
so it's that kind of, you may just want to, for, bend at the elbows. It's still folding. So I start to get people to think, oh, okay, now we're not saying forward fold, we're saying fold. So it's that kind of thing. We're going to, you know, um, open our legs a bit wider. But if you don't want to open your legs wide, what about opening your arms wide and bringing your arms down to the floor, or touching the floor, or something like that? So it's we're doing a rotation, and but you may not want to. You may want to do a slight, just move the shoulders, or you may want to swivel the knees. So it's all of that, where it's trying not to be so specific, but trying to get somebody to capture their imagination and go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I didn't have to do the legs, that I could do the upper body. So yeah, and it's being slow enough to give people a chance to decide what they want to do.
That brings a smile to my face, just kind of thinking about that improv, and, how to create an environment where we're still all doing something together.
Mm.
There's this like kind of unity and movement that's still happening as a group, but there's no rigidity about how that has to look or in what direction we have to move or which part of the body we have to be moving at the same time. So there's a lot of allowance for individuality and diversity within that unity, which is like so inspiring to me. It's like, that sounds like the essence of yoga to me.
And I hope it works. People come back and yeah. So I say it's not, oh, you come into class and anything goes. You're still
Hmm.
working within parameters, but you're allowing people to show up how they are, how they feel on the day. And I think for me, that's really important. And those are kind of the classes I seek out when I actually attend, is that because I've been to, obviously pre-pandemic, where I remember sitting in a class and doing something because, again, not to be disrespectful, but I knew I had a bit of an injury and I thought, I can't do that. And the teacher kept repeating over and over again. And I looked around the room and I thought, well, everybody else is doing it. So I suspect she's talking to me
Oh
because she
no.
kept saying to go into this particular posture. And I thought, I can't today. And I'm okay with not being able to do it. And even
Hmm.
again, when I walked out of the class, and at the time I wasn't teaching, but I thought, oh, I think, how would that make somebody feel that they know now somebody is actually talking to them, but they don't want to say, actually, I can't do that today because my back. And but I just
Hmm.
laughed. I remember laughing, thinking, oh, I think she's talking to me. Well, it's not happening. So
Yeah, well, coming back to safety, I think like that's where I have a safety concern, is where someone feels pressured to override the advice their own body is giving them, because a teacher is really emphasizing like, this is how we're doing this right now. So that's like the opposite of what we were talking about,
Mm,
where you want to empower people to feel what's going on and to make their own determination. Because I don't care how experienced or how wonderful a teacher is, they cannot feel what you're feeling.
absolutely.
They
That,
cannot.
that's very, very true.
Well, I'm wondering if you have favorite poses or movements that you do. What are your go-tos on the chair?
Um, I like to sometimes start with a little bit of free flow movement. Especially, we just start maybe with cat cow, um, rotation from side to side, circles, and and swaying from side to side, and then do those, just kind of getting the body a little bit looser, and then start saying to people, now you're doing your cat cow, how if you put your fingers on your shoulders and kept your elbows into your side? How does that change the cat cow? Because sometimes you see people really doing a lot of shoulder movement rather than the spine. So I might say, okay, we're going to see if we can take those arms out of cat cow. How does that feel? How does that change anything? Now go back to go back to your version of cat cow. So allowing them to try different things. So and even with swaying from side to side, what would it be like if you turned your head? So we kind of add things on, and then I
Hmm.
say to them, go back to it. And then what do you want to do out of all those four movements? And you start seeing some people with their eyes closed, whether they're really into their cat cow, or, I'll say maybe it's cat cow, then rotation back to cat cow, or swaying. That's kind of a thing, just to get people to loosen up a little bit. And it's interesting that some people really go with that, and other people sort of say, I feel like a rabbit in headlights. I didn't know what to do. And, so you kind of tweak it out of people who feel comfortable moving in a chair. Also depends, um, again, if people can move there. So I don't make the assumption that some people that come to class can't move I always talk about from the belly button down to the big toe. So some people may not be able to move their lower limbs. So I don't automatically, I've had it where somebody was in a wheelchair, and so adapted the class. You teach to who's in front of you, so you adapt the
Hmm.
class. So it's about kind of getting people to move maybe their spine, especially when we get to a certain age. We need to be able to utilize our spine. So and also I think letting people discover the joy of sitting on a chair. That they didn't know that they could move on a chair in that way. So yeah, those kind of movements, maybe again, moving the toes. I like getting, if that's available to people. If the toes aren't available to people, get them to move their fingers, and if you can't move your ankles, let's move our wrists. So we kind of find different parts of the upper or the lower body. So it's always thinking, okay, if I can't move my knees, what can I do with my elbows? So it's that kind of thing. That's, yeah, I think I just enjoy movement, I think.
Yeah, same here. I love to do subtle things like that, like you're talking about. I think there's a million variations of cat cow.
Mm,
Like if we just think of cat cow as spinal flexion and extension, there's so many ways we could approach that. And we could, hold a certain part still and kind of shift the movement into a different area, or we could do different things with the arms or the pelvis or the head or the neck, or there's just a lot of different ways we could think about that, or different orientations like seated, or maybe with your hands on the chair and you're
mm,
standing, or something else, because it's just, I think it's easy for people to kind of get into a rote place with some of these kind of movements, like, oh, yeah, yeah, cat cow, I've done it 1,000 times. But, you haven't done it 1,000 times today. So, is there anything we could discover? Is there anything that maybe could give us a glimpse of a different insight if we shifted it? So, that's why one of the reasons I love to use props, because I think
mm.
they give us that kind of variety and different ways of maybe making a new discovery.
Absolutely. And then even with balance, it completely slows you down. So even just sitting on a chair, and then I might introduce the use of a block, because we're moving the block balanced on the back of our hand or balanced on our palm, or we're using a strap, and you think, but we're sat on the chair. Like, yeah, we're sat on the chair, but we're going to now use a strap. We're going to use a block. So yeah, it's not just, it's, I'm not taking anything away from you because we're on a chair. We're adding to, and hopefully just being able to open our minds a little bit more to, what we can do seated.
Yeah, to me, it's like, we can do poses on our back. We could do poses laying on our front body. We could do poses sitting. We could do poses standing. And we could do poses sitting on the floor. We could do poses sitting in a chair. And it gives us so many more options and ways of exploring, and none of them are better, more virtuous, or cooler, or more advanced than any of the others.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think chair yoga is always gentle and slow, or is it something that can be used as a way of creating an appropriate challenge for a student, or where they could build strength in a pose?
I think it can be. And the question back to you is that, just sitting down could be a challenge to somebody.
Very
You,
true.
you know, we we're coming from a standpoint of being able-bodied.
Hmm.
So for me, um, yes, you can do that. That's not my aim for coming to
Hmm.
a class, but I know that I could do something that I believe in my own world is actually okay, and it's simple. Or, and somebody could say that was a real. I have a lady that has arthritis, so she'll say just raising the arms today was a real challenge for me. Moving my wrists was a real challenge.
Hmm.
So, but for her, keeping moving, keeping those joints mobilized is helping, and she's feeling some strength in that. Somebody, another person, says, my shoulders are really tight, but the movements that we've done today have helped me. I feel better. I feel that I have to be very careful in
Mm-hmm.
saying, yes, it could be strengthening, yes, it could be challenging, because just for somebody to move their leg could be very, very challenging. But the strength comes from, okay, I'm going to keep doing that, or I'm going to, when we finish this class going further, I'm going to stop and do that. So actually, beforehand, when I wanted to raise my leg, I was leaning back into the chair. Now I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sit upright and I'm going to lift the leg. That might now be more of a challenge to me. And on my core 360 around the body, that could create a challenge for me. So again, it's down to interpretation. But the classes that I teach are not there for you to build strength. They're not there. They're not that specific in mind. It's just to open you up to the idea that you can take it further if that's what you want. However, we still have that stigma of chair yoga is for people over a certain age. It's for anybody who isn't able-bodied. It's for people who are injured. It's for, and it's for, and then fill in the blanks. And actually, it's for everybody who sits down. Because not everybody who sits on a chair is actually mobile. They may just be in that sagittal plane of walking, sitting down, standing up, walking, maybe occasionally turning around, but sitting on the chair, I'm getting you to move in all planes of motion. I'm getting you to move in ways that you probably think, I've never done that before, even standing up. But now I'm doing that in or on, should I say, on a chair. So yeah, it's about moving the body in a way that's sustainable, I think, is, and hopefully enjoyable. Enjoyable.
I love how you answered that question and approached that question, because you're so right that, even just showing up to the mat could be the challenge. Having the courage to come to class could be the challenge, or even slowing down the
Mm.
practice can be really challenging, because, if we're kind of used to keeping ourselves really busy and um, living in that way, sometimes it's very surprising what comes up when we start to slow down and experience more stillness and space. So I think that you've sort of reframed this challenge concept in a way, and I love that. And I think it's, I ask because of that stigma that people think, I have to be doing something that feels like a workout when I do
Mm.
yoga. And I think there's so much more to offer than just that feeling of you've got to work out, you know.
And absolutely, because that's one of the things that um, one of the ladies that comes to the chair yoga class that I teach, she says, I just feel it's a way of mindfully moving and just really embodying what you can do. She said, you even when you just get us to rock, you talk about sitting bones. Well, you might not know what that means. So I'm getting people to just rock from side to side. And do you feel, and not saying, do you feel it on the chair? Because again, do we have a lot of abundance in the back body? And if we do, maybe that connection with the chair, we're not going to feel it. So now I'm getting you to
Mm.
tune in. And when you shift from side to side, do you feel a different balance from one side to the other? So somebody could say, yes, I feel that. I understand that, rather than, oh my gosh, I don't feel that on the chair, but I feel that in my body. And they may never have done that before. So it's that kind of thing that, it's a tune in and finding ways and discovering, and I ask people to be an observer and be curious about what your body can do right now. I don't not worried about yesterday, I'm not worried about tomorrow. What can you do right now, and have that honest conversation with yourself, and we can do it on a chair. So yay.
Right on. We can totally do it on a chair, and with a lot of creativity and joy and fun and connection.
Mm.
So Thank you so much, Karen. I've really enjoyed this conversation about bringing creativity into the practice and how that enhances the accessibility of the practice, inherently. Is there anything you want to add to the conversation or anything that we haven't covered that might be important to share?
Um, if you're frightened to take a class, don't be, and don't be frightened to be on a chair. It's and use any support, any props, and don't think, oh, I haven't got the yoga bolster, I haven't got the strap. Have you got Tupperware? I don't know if that's a universal, we call that Tupperware all over
Yeah, we
the
do
world.
too.
Have you got Tupperware? Have you got boxes? Have you got a little step? It's about bringing the ground closer to you, finding what works for you in your body, and showing up for you. And it's just such an empowering experience. And it should be joy. It should be fun. You should be finding your inner peace. So that's me. And apart from, I didn't know whether you wanted me to read a little poem. So, but apart from
Yes,
that,
I had emailed you that, and then I was like, I don't know if I should put her on the spot to read a poem, but if you have one, we would love to hear it.
I do. It's just a very short one, but it's if I have endless chatter tonight, it doesn't matter. It's about accepting me, a willingness for now to be, with whatever arises, a simple gesture that minimizes thoughts that may be tough, of accepting I am enough.
Oh, I love that. Oh, your students are so lucky to hear your poems in your classes and your beautiful approach.
Thank you.
um, Karen, where could people find you if they want to practice with you or follow you and get some good ideas from
Yeah,
you?
thank you. Well, my name, Karen James Yoga, is my Instagram handle. I also exactly the same. I'm a very simple person. Karen James, Karen James Yoga.co.uk or .com. And then on my website, it shows you when I teach classes. They're all online when I teach classes. I think I need to update that because obviously closing down for Christmas and New Year. And even on Facebook, again, Karen James Yoga, very simple. So
That's smart. That makes it easy to find you.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I will definitely link those things on the website when we post this episode. But again, thank you so much for taking the time, Karen, and sharing your creativity and your delightful, wise approach to yoga.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure. Thanks so much, Addie. Thank you.
So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend and or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find us that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, live online classes, teacher trainings, and private lessons, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. Thanks so much for listening.